On September 11th, 2001, our American way of life was attacked. Everyone remembers where they were that day and how their lives changed from that moment on. The American Legion is committed to honoring the memories of those we lost on 9/11 and in the global war on terrorism that followed. As part of that commitment, the American Legion Tango Alpha Lima podcast presents a special series, 9/11-20-20-20. 20 episodes in the 20 days leading up to the 20th anniversary of the attacks that changed the world. Each of the 20 guests delivers a unique, first-hand perspective on 9/11 and our nation's response. Here is one of those remarkable stories.
All right, today we're joined by Wilem Wong, who is a veteran, a nurse, and a 20-year officer with the NYPD. He's actually recently retired, so congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, his office overlooked the site of the former Twin Towers, and he was in Afghanistan 10 years ago when Osama bin Laden was killed in May of 2011, I believe.
Yes.
To honor the NYPD officers and dispatchers, his post is working with others to provide care packages between now and the anniversary date. Wilem is a member of Post 1291 in New York City, which provided relief and support for first responders in the aftermath of 9/11. And I believe that is the post that our former national commander Fang Wong was a member of, isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
So thank you very much for joining us here. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy retirement schedule to join us here. But tell us a little bit about about your job in New York City, and then how you came to be in Afghanistan, and basically just tell us what your 9/11 story is.
So my actual 9/11 story started when I actually was working at 2 World Trade Center back in 1997 to 1999. So I was actually working at what they call the South Tower, which is also known as 2 World Trade Center on the 86th floor. So I was working for the New York State Tax and Finance. So I was actually a tax evasion, income tax and sales tax evasion criminal investigator. So when I resigned from that position, my mom was actually very pissed off because, there's a saying in Chinese that it's a golden rice bowl. You're not going to get rich from civil service, but you're not going to be hungry. So she basically didn't understand until that day on 9/11. I said, wow. Then she realized that I actually would have been there if I continued work. I actually left about 20 months prior to 9/11. But the people that I worked with, most of them died. There was actually one survivor I know that survived both the 1993 attack and also the 2001 attack. But I remember vividly that one person that kept on asking me about if I want to resign was this person named Sal Papasso. He was in a sister unit of mine called the Petroleum Alcohol Tobacco Firearms. It's almost like the ATF for New York State. Mm-hmm. And he basically said, hey, once upon my resignation, he was going to take my position, and my position was considered a promotion for him. And unfortunately, he asked me so many times. I said, look, how many times do I have to tell you? I'm actually going to go work for Gap Corporate, because I was working for what they call corporate social responsibility at that time, at my next position in my corporate capacity. So I said, look, so I basically took my badge off my belt and I said, hey, here, you want the badge? I'll give it to you. I don't know what to say. I'm going to resign in 2 weeks. Found out later that he was counting on my resignation so he could get married and use my position as a promotion so he could get married. And then I realized later that when someone told me that the only thing that they found on his body was the badge on his just a remnants of his torso. And I said, wow. So from that point on, I said, wow, that's an eerie feeling. I still get chills thinking about that. Like, that's the only thing they ID'd him was the badge and remnants of his torso, because they didn't find anything else of him that they could match DNA wise.
Wow, that's terrible. So how did you come to be in the military, and when did you join the police force?
So I joined the military in 1988.
Okay.
So basically, I joined during President Reagan's, near the tail end of President Reagan. And when I finished basic training in AIT, it was November 9th, 1989. And I never really looked at my DD-214 that that clearly until maybe like the last 5-10 years. And I realized, wait a second, November 9, 1989 was the fall of the Berlin Wall. And so I realized, wow, I actually entered active duty for basic training AIT during the Cold War. And then upon leaving active duty from training, it was actually the post-Cold War at that point.
And what did you do when you were in the service?
So I was enlisted for 12 years from 1988 to 2000. I was a what they call a nutritional food service specialist, and then I was a combat medic, and then I was a nurse. So I actually got my nursing license through the Army, so to speak, and I still maintain my nursing license from New York State because of my military training. And then I got commissioned in 2000 as a health service planning officer. And so for the last 20 years, I've been a commissioned officer, but overall service, I have 32 years. So my current rank is Lieutenant Colonel at this point.
Oh, nice. So now you serve in is it the New York Guard or is it the Reserve?
Army Reserves. I was always in the Army Reserve the whole time. And then when I was in Iraq, I was with Army Civil Affairs, 353 Civil Affairs in Staten Island. And then in 2011, I just happened to be on a special assignment with the Marines as a human terrain team leader in Helmand Province, Afghanistan.
Wow. And so that's what you did when you were there in 2011?
2011. Well, you know, my Army buddies basically said, hey, who did you piss off to be assigned to Marines?
Yeah, especially on an HTT team.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that experience and you know, what it meant to be over there after having seen, you know, what had gone down on 9/11.
So the human terrain team, or the human terrain system, was a very controversial program that was basically was an idea of General Petraeus, right? I'm pretty sure there's other people behind it, but he was the one that spearheaded the human terrain system and got it funded from a proof of concept to a. So actually, my team was actually the first one after the proof of concept was approved, and so the human terrain team was to understand the human terrain. So General Petraeus had a saying: the decisive terrain is the human terrain. And I said, wow. I said, yeah, you have, and of course, working in civil affairs before, you know, the saying always goes, winning hearts and minds, but the human terrain team brought it beyond winning hearts and minds. Like you actually have to have a deeper understanding of the human terrain. So one of my team members was an anthropologist and archaeologist, PhD. So I had all these PhD social scientist types. All my team members were all civilians. So when I was interacting with the Marines from RCT-1 and RCT-5, on the RCT-1 under Colonel Furness and under RCT-5 under Colonel Turner, who are both generals at this point in the Marine Corps. You know, the Marines basically looked at my guys like, oh, you bunch of Birkenstock, latte sipping, you know, granola crunching type of guys. I said, look, my guys, and I happen to be the team leader and the only military team member on the team. So I wore a uniform. Everyone didn't wear a uniform, or most of them actually didn't even serve in the military. So I said, look, my guys are here to understand the terrain differently from you guys. If somehow we can't influence the terrain, the people, then you guys are the blunt force instrument that comes behind us to take necessary action, right? So my guys has a different mission, but we all have a common mission of trying to secure the environment, basically.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with the HTT teams. I know that at least by 2005, the contract was with BAE had the contract, and I had actually put in a full packet, and I had been accepted to the HTT teams. And then I met my wife and decided maybe it wasn't, you know, I was getting a little long in the tooth to be playing soldier guy in Afghanistan too much longer. But I love the program. I thought it was
it's great.
Yeah,
it was great. I mean, I have to say one thing, like I was a little skeptical because, you know, I just got back from Iraq in early 2009. And then by 2010, they were all calling me to go back in. And I was like, no, I don't want to go back in. And then I transferred to the IRR. And then by 2010, they basically said, pick your poison. I said, look, I'm going to join the human terrain team. And my wife wasn't sure about that. But anyway, I think it was one of the better decisions because that was one of those, you know, experience I could never get. And, you know, it was one of the great experience I ever had. It was very controversial, but
Yeah, and it was. I mean, people need to it was a pretty dangerous mission. The HCT guys are out there, and girls are completely on their own for the most part. It was.
Yeah, because the thing is, Mark, you know, I was there to be the program. I think like some type of data manager, but eventually the team leader that I had was kicked off and wasn't able to come in country. And they're in the flight of going to Afghanistan. I was asked, guess what? You want to be the team leader or not? I said, what's my recourse? You have no recourse. I said, okay, I'll take it. Because the colonel that was in charge of the program, one of the colonels that was in charge of the program was an SF guy. I guess he basically put my name in and said, hey, you want the position or not? I said, I'll take the position. And as a major, I wasn't even a major yet. I was a captain at that time. Mm-hmm. And so that's usually a lieutenant colonel spot. So I got promoted in country to major. I was already slotted to be promoted. And I was below the zone at the same time. So it was great, you know. But it was an honor to serve, especially when I'm up against a lot of people that are much higher ranking than myself.
Right. Ashley, you are up.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. Thanks, listening Ashley. To you I'm just so visual, and I imagine. So I want to ask you a little bit more about your American Legion post and your involvement. I know that the post 1291 had provided relief and support for first responders in the aftermath of 9/11, and I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about your relationship with the American Legion and how you came to be a Legionnaire. Obviously, you've had a very amazing career with, you know, some of these big events, and I'm just curious as to how and when Legion became involved in your life.
So I actually joined the American Legion, post 1291, the Kimlau post in 2000. So this is actually my 21st year with the Kimlau post. And I walked in without being sponsored by anyone. I just walked up to the post and I already had 12 years in as an enlisted service member at that time. I think I was still an enlisted service member at that time. I didn't get commissioned until November of 2000. So I probably went there around April, May of 2000. I went up there and just said, hey, I'd like to join. And I wasn't sure, was it Fang Wong or Gabe Mui, the adjutant, saying, oh, well, what makes you qualify? I said, so I submitted my paperwork that I served in, you know, even though it was annual training, I was in El Salvador and in Panama. And so they said, oh, okay, you got overseas service, even though it was for trainings. They said you qualify as per the national headquarters, because they had to submit my paperwork in, and it felt like almost like they were reluctant to let me in. I said, well, why? You know, I'm willing to join. You know, so and then from that point on, you know, I just try to, you know, participate as much as I can because I'm still in the service. I have a young family right now. I try to do as much as I can. I have an 8-year-old daughter and 6-year-old son. So it's very difficult to try to participate as much as I can with them, but I try to do the best I can. And currently, even though I retired from the NYPD has an American Legion post called American Legion Post 460. So we have the NYPD, even though it's the biggest municipal police department in the country, the United States, we have 35,000 cops, right? But out of that, about 10% or about 3,700 of them are veterans within, that are veterans. And within New York City, we have about 320,000 municipal city workers, you know, in all city agencies. Out of that, that's about 8,000 of them are veterans. So we actually have close to 45% of all the veterans in any city agency in just NYPD. I didn't believe it. I was like, I was even asking about FDNY and saying, you know, even though FDNY it was about 10 to 12,000, you know, firefighters and EMS. Well, I should say firefighters. I didn't know how many of them were veterans, but I would say less than even 5%, which I was kind of surprised, you know.
Wow. Thank you for dropping knowledge bombs on all of us. I did not know that. That was very cool.
Because I work closely with the New York City Department of Veteran Services, because in my role in the NYPD, my recent role in the NYPD before I retired, I was part of the NYPD startup called health and wellness section. So the health and wellness section stood up in 2019 to address the 10 NYPD suicides that we had, active duty suicides, like people that actually were active members of the service that killed themselves. That does include retirees and stuff like that. So if I'm pretty sure you guys know, within the general population, 18.2 individuals kill themselves per 100,000, right? And if you extrapolated that 30 per 35,000, that's, 10 per 35,000 is almost 30 per 100,000 in just the NYPD. So that became an epidemic, and we started the health and wellness to address mental health issues and suicide prevention. So I've been coordinating with the New York City Department of Veteran Services to get transcendental meditation for our veterans in NYPD. I also teach mental health first aid to the veterans and other people within NYPD. We trained over 11,000 people so far within NYPD in that. But that was since 2017. So I either coordinated or I taught the class myself. So
you are amazing. I love
thanks.
it. I love it.
No, because I feel passionate about it, because that's something that I'm already kind of doing within the military, right? I'm a medical service officer, so I want to.
It's an extension of you. It's your second service, your continued care for the community. I love it.
Yes.
All right, Jeffrey, now that you're back and with us, you are up.
All right. I couldn't let it go without saying that with all the amazing stuff you've done, I don't think you pissed anybody off to go to the Marines. I think they rewarded you to be working with the Marine Corps. So
it was definitely a different culture, because I had to understand the culture of the Marines, right? So they're very more self-effacing than a lot of other services, to say it nicely.
Well, my post members call us a cult. That's what they say to us there.
Oh, yeah.
And it's also interesting that you're doing the first aid, the mental health first aid, because we started that a couple of years ago and got about 20 members of my post trained in that.
Nice.
My question goes to the history that you have of the timing of when you joined with the Berlin Wall going down, and just all the way through your retirement. You've had a very interesting timeline of service. And the one thing that was brought out at the beginning when Mark read your bio, that you were in Afghanistan when Osama bin Laden was killed.
Yes.
And I don't want to get super after school special here, but it's when you said the story about your colleague and they found your badge on his torso. Mm-hmm. Then you're in Afghanistan when Osama bin Laden was killed. I don't want to speculate on the feelings that you had in stringing those two really significant events together for you personally, but if you can share something about that, and also the mood of the people around you, because Osama bin Laden was really the reason why we were there, right? Mm-hmm. So you personally, because of the connection to that badge, that physical piece, and then kind of what everyone was kind of thinking.
Wow. So I still remember vividly that day when I woke up on May 1st, 2011, when Osama bin Laden was killed. And I was like, wow. To me, it was a big closure, so to speak, because I'm a New Yorker. I'm with NYPD, so we already lost 23 NYPD service members on September 11, not including the 37 Port Authority police officer and the 343 FDNY firefighters, right? So it was a big deal, and seeing the scene in Times Square, and everyone was happy. But I also know that was not the end. It was not going to be the end. Killing Osama bin Laden was not going to be the end of this. It's just going to be another phase of this long, drawn out, long war, so to speak, right? That General Petraeus spoke about. So it's just evolving all the time. And then after that, think the rise of ISIS, right? And I think shortly after that, and that became another issue. And then we're still continuing, and then now we're pulling out of Afghanistan. And I don't know how people really feel, including myself. Like, was it worth it? Right? Some people would say, was it worth it? All the people, treasure and lives lost at this point, just to pull out. What was really gained at this point in Iraq and Afghanistan, specifically Afghanistan, because that country is known as the graveyard of empires, so to speak. All these countries that went through it to try to, let's say, control it, or at least have influence on it, really got nowhere, so to speak, right? It just had some control, but after a while, we don't have that much control over it.
So, all right, and so I guess the point being, my point being is that you had a big why in your life for being there, even though it happened after you served. Did it change your? How did 9/11 change your service from your perspective? What you thought about your service, how you connected with your service? Did it make you stay longer? Like, I'm really trying to uncover the 9/11 effect on Wilem.
Okay. All right. So, obviously I joined the service before 9/11, but because of 9/11, I definitely wanted to stay longer, because that was, something that I felt had to be done. I had to serve, and my capacity was mainly not the infantry portion, right? Not the kinetic portion of the war, but the non-kinetic, to build the capacity, to be able to build that capacity for the host nation, so they could govern themselves, hopefully on their terms, with the credibility for their people, right? So that's hard to speak about sometimes, but I felt that, we have to be able to give it back to their country, right? Even though, we don't want to be seen as conquerors, and there's always, like, I saw, especially working in the medical field, I saw specifically there were units, or the models were crusaders, and they had to, like, strike that out. They had to strike out the Red Cross from anywhere, just so that we're not seen as a crusade, so to speak. I saw a lot of that PC going on also in country, and a lot of things that I'm pretty sure about that you may have seen that had to be PC, because there were things that, from the Western point of view, was like, why are we doing this, or allowing certain things to happen in country? But we took it as it's a cultural phenomenon that we don't understand, and we have to let it go, so to speak. That's a hard question, because I felt that it's my sense of duty to do what I can, but it's hard to say, was the outcome what we want it to be? That's every veteran has to answer that themselves, that has served in Iraq and Afghanistan. Was it the outcome that we want? That's a political question, but on a personal note, I can only say I did the best I can, right? That's the only thing you could really say. I did the best I can in the amount of time I had, because I had to pick up. I had the ball at a certain time on this timeline, right? In Iraq, Afghanistan, I picked up the ball, carried the ball, handed off to the next rotation, so to speak, and then they did what they can, right? So I can only say that I did the best I can, and with my team members also. Right? So.
Yeah, I think you and I aren't going to answer whether it was worth it or not. I think historians are going to have to do that in a time when when we were fully pulled out and some time has passed. But I appreciate your answer.
Yes.
It's sort of a dark sense of humor, but I've heard it from hundreds of Afghan vets that are saying, like, hey man, when I left, we were still winning. And I've heard that from, and even when I was there in 2004, the first time, to when I went back in 2010, they were drastically different. It might as well have been kind of two different wars. Even the locations that were the same didn't look anything like when we were there in 2004. We would have small fobs And then when I went back in 10, they were like a mile long. It was crazy. So now that you're retired, what do we have on the front burner? What are you going to do to keep yourself busy?
So I'm basically taking the time to decompress because people have been kind enough to offer me positions, but like, what's the point of retiring if I can't take time off for myself and my family, at least the whole summer at this point, before I re-engage, so to speak. But I'm still involved with a lot of the veteran stuff related to mental health, either through the Department of Veteran Services or my old unit, near NYPD Health and Wellness section, just to address the veterans, veterans' concerns, either through transcendental meditation. We're trying to do something regarding therapy dogs, and also working on not equine therapy, but equine experiential learning, they call it. So there's a couple things I'm working on behind the scenes, even though I'm retired, because I felt like I have to finish what I started. Even though I'm retired, I still want to finish what I started. And I'm trying to also get the Veterans Conference off the ground with Department of Veteran Services. We had about 400 to 500 veterans within NYPD that we were about to do a Veterans Conference on March 18, 2019, before 2020, before COVID happened. And we had all these great speakers. We had the Marine from Ernie and Joe, Ernie and Joe, that HBO documentary. He was supposed to be one of our guest speakers, speaking about mental health and PTSD. So we want to have veterans that we can identify with, that could speak about lived experience, because it's hard to relate to other people unless you're a veteran yourself sometimes. Even NYPD, I felt closer to my veteran buddies that are NYPD police officers, right? Not taking away from other cops. I'm just saying that I felt closer because we had another layer of bonding that transcend wearing the NYPD uniform. So
great. We really appreciate you taking time from your day and talking to us today, and couldn't appreciate more all that you've done for both the NYPD and as a veteran. So again, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Remember to subscribe to the Tango Alpha Lima podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And while you're there, please rate and leave us a review. If you have any questions or comments, you can send us an email at tangoalphalima@legion.org. And we will be back tomorrow with another 9/11 story. But folks, thanks for joining us. Bye.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.